Welcome to Spinning Back Clique each week here at MMA Junkie. We take a quick spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week, we've got MMA Junkies Nolan King and Mike Bond, as well as MMA Junkie Radio's gorgeous George Garcia. So let's just jump right into it. Guys, this past weekend, TJ Dillashaw returned from a 2-year suspension and picked up a win over top contender Cory Sandhagen at UFC on ESPN 27. Now, Dillashaw's made it clear he wants his belt back, and he wants the winner of the upcoming Aljamain Sterling versus Peter Yan rematch. But that's not for another 3 months at least, so he may need to take another fight to stay busy. So what do you think, guys? Is there a fight that you would make right now for TJ Dillashaw and recommend he take to stay busy in the meantime? Or has he done enough to get the title shot and should just stick around and wait for that? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get it started.
I mean, it really comes down to what TJ Dillashaw talked about in the post-fight press conference, which is he's banged up. I mean, he went through a laundry list of injuries that we didn't even know existed. You pair that with the knee tweak in the fight, with the cut, which seems to be a recurring issue. To me, it seems like the guy who, went through 2 grueling training camps back-to-back should take some time off, make sure he's 100%. He even said that some of the stuff that happened this past camp for the rebooked fight, it was really difficult to deal with. And so for me, I guess it really comes down to timing. I think that maybe one more would be appropriate. Depending on when he's going to come back. Rob Font's name comes to mind. It seems like that would be a good fight for kind of a placeholder. If not, Font might be the backup fighter. Who knows? We October 30th, Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling seems like the direction the UFC is going in. Will they do a backup fighter for that fight? That could interfere with it. But if he had to fight one more time, I definitely think Rob Font's the guy. You can't forget about that performance that he put on against Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah, no question about it. Rob Font's hot. I mean, that bantamweight division is just great, right? I mean, you could grab any name in there and make something. But as you said, a lot of injuries, and, maybe the time is right to take a little bit of time off. That certainly stood out to me. Of course, then he said right away, yeah, but book me next week. I've got all those injuries, but book me next week. So that was pretty funny. Mike, what about you? I mean, time away, is that going to work out in his favor? Or do you see another fight that maybe should be made to get him into that title shot with no question?
Yeah, well, I think he already deserves the title shot with no question. It's just like Nolan said, all this stuff really right now comes down to timing. I would sit and heal and wait up for that October 30th date when Yan and Sterling are seemingly going to rematch and then just see what happens there. I mean, if Sterling, say, re-aggravates the neck injury he had that just required surgery and wins, or Peter Yan tears a knee and wins, and they're out 6 months, 8 months, well, yeah, then TJ Dillashaw definitely not advisable to wait around for that because you're looking at another year-long layoff or something like that. So for him, I would just wait these next couple months, see what happens in that fight, and just cross my fingers and toes that someone comes out of that fight the winner and healthy and is able to fight him maybe in the first quarter. Because to me, I mean, really risky either way deciding to fight again if he did do that, say, like, as the co-main event on that card or a month later, because look how close this fight was, man, against Cory Sandhagen. It came down to the wire. He could have easily lost this one. Then where does he stand in terms of the title picture? The fight isn't going to be any easier against Rob Font, in my opinion, or whichever elite bantamweight they put him in there with. So for him, it's a very risky endeavor to go in there, take another fight. All this could go away easily right now. He came back, he had the big return victory, put himself right back in the top of the conversation with what I thought was a sensational performance. And I say you just kind of sit on that momentum, squat on it a little bit, see how this thing plays out. And I think you're right there in a good spot either way.
Yeah, definitely risky to compete, but could be risky to wait around too, right? You never know what's going to happen in that bantamweight title fight. It's been filled with weirdness already. George, what would you recommend?
Yeah, like the guy said, we got 3 months before the Yan Aljamain Sterling fight, and then perfect scenario, whoever comes out, let's say they're ready to turn it around in 3 months. That's 6 months away. Does Dillashaw want to wait that long after fighting, for the first time in 2.5 years? That's when you get paid, and I think that's why he left the opening as to why he was maybe willing to do something a lot sooner, because that's when he gets paid. And he also knows the game. He's been around. It just sometimes doesn't work out that way. You got Rob Font, who's streaking. And whether you match him up or not with him, you got to know, am I ahead of this guy if everything goes in the perfect scenario where Yan and Sterling can turn it around, the winner can turn it around. So in the meantime, look, you got Garbrandt. That's a heated matchup. Calling out a third fight. Would he want to do that? I don't know. He's up 2-0. And then you got some legends like Cruz, who he's got a loss to, or Frankie Edgar, who just wouldn't want to say, I fought Frankie Edgar at one point in my career, maybe just to, keep sharp.
Man, I didn't even really think about the fact if he hasn't been paid in 2 years, that might factor into the decision-making process as well, right? I mean, I would say I would recommend patience for him and get those injuries healed. But as you said, he might want to collect a paycheck after missing 2.5 years. Well, guys, while we're talking about UFC on ESPN 27, there were a number of fantastic performances on that card, which is really pretty exciting from start to finish. Outside of that main event, who was the standout performer for you? Did anyone make a statement that's going to stick with you moving forward? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock and start with you, Mike.
Brendan Allen, for sure. I mean, if I had told you coming into this fight that he was going to beat Puna Soriano by unanimous decision and not really have the fight go to the ground at all at any point, I don't know if I would have believed you. I mean, for him to go in there and largely outstrike him, take some big shots on the feet and be able to, not really ever get hurt or knocked down, just really impressive and shows an evolution to his game. 5-0 as a middleweight, obviously the only blemish on his UFC record, that 195 catch weight loss to Sean Strickland, which we all know how badly he wants that one back. He gets to, brings that up any opportunity he has. So to me, he's a guy that's on the rise at 185. And to see him go in there, I thought it was an interesting challenge against a super powerful striker, undefeated, and Puna coming in. And he handled him pretty well, in my opinion. And I think that says some really good things about him when you look at kind of the upper tier of that 185 class. The dudes like Marvin Vittori, like Paulo Costa, who definitely have some similar traits to that. So, I came away really impressed with Brendan Allen, and I have been high on him since, even pre-UFC. Been really impressed with his work inside the octagon so far, and I think that one was even more eye-opening again. So I hope now with 5 wins in a row in this division, he gets a legit top 10 matchup next.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And like you said, not just for the fact that he beat an undefeated Punahele Soriano, but the way he beat him, like you said, that was just a fantastic performance. George, what about you? Who stood out on the card for you?
I had a couple because there was a lot for different reasons, and I'm actually going to change my answer. I was going with Darren Elkins earlier, which I could present a case as to why I just thought it was great that he never retired, and look what he's done now, probably pocketed an extra $300K from winning the last 2 fights. But now that I think about it, Sijara Eubanks, I really liked what she said post-fight. First of all, she was dominant in the fight, but then post-fight, she pointed out, hey, look, I got wins over Lauren Murphy and Roxanne Modafferi, and Murphy's going to fight for the title. Modafferi has fought for the title. Relevant names still, both ranked, obviously, with Murphy fighting Shevchenko soon. And to point that out and to also reinforce, hey, look, I made some bad decisions. I cleaned things up. Going forward, this is the new Eubanks, the new Sarge. I don't know. That's a division where I think she can really get one more win. And because of her past, maybe be in title contention a lot sooner than you would have thought. And that's not bad for a 36-year-old who we thought may have washed out. She had the weight cutting problems and then the losses at bantamweight. But, man, she's been able to find a way to rejuvenate her career. And 7-6 overall, you can't say that very often in this sport.
The classic Gorgeous George move. Ask for one, you give us two. Come on now. But good choices. Both of them are really good choices. Nolan, how about you? Anybody stand out for you?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it to one. Julio Arce on the prelims, maybe an off-the-board pick a little bit, but I think this guy, he's kind of mild-mannered. He's flown under the radar. He's not somebody that's going to go on the mic and talk up a good game, but his performances, win or lose in the UFC, have really impressed me at featherweight. And to see him drop down to bantamweight after, a year and a half away and put on a performance like that, I mean, he's going to be a handful for anyone at 135 pounds. I thought his striking looked great. And to be able to put away a guy like Andre Ewell like that, added to the impression that I think he made in his bantamweight debut in the UFC. Hopefully he can remain, stay more active and he doesn't have those long layoffs. I'm not really sure why he was out that long this time, whether it was an injury or whatever. But to me, man, I think that his trajectory at 135 pounds, who knows, in a year or so, maybe we could see him crack the rankings. I know 135 is pretty stacked right now. That's a tough bar to set for him. But I think he can do it, and I think that I'm really excited to see where he goes from here.
Another great choice there. And how crazy is it that after all that you guys just said, we didn't talk about Mickey Gall? You could make a case for him. You could talk about Adrian Yanez looking fantastic. Holly and Paiva in a new weight class did something big. It's controversial, but you could even say Macy Barber. Yes, most people think she lost the fight, but she showed a lot of character in that third round. She dug deep and was pressing to the end. So that just goes to show you how deep that card was, man. That was honestly one of the best night of fights I've seen in a long time. Unbelievable. Well, guys, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship also held an event this past weekend as well, and Rachael Ostovich picked up a decision win over Paige VanZant, who is now 0-2 in the promotion. Now, VanZant was still smiling as she gave Instagram the old Stockton salute. But where does she go from here? Does she stick with BKFC, or is a return to MMA in order? What's the move for her now at this point in her career? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. George, get us started.
If the money's too good to refuse and she doesn't mind going back to BKFC, go for it. But I just think BKFC is about to really, really hit it an even bigger stride and blow up with a lot of stand-up fighters, boxers, kickboxers coming over and just doing their thing. Paige is, God bless her. She's trying to round out her game. She fought, valiantly on Saturday night, but she's not a striker. She's not a boxer. She's a scrappy grappler. I'd like to see her back in MMA. I realize at the same time, I think 25ers are too big for her, and she has trouble making 115, the strawweight division. However, one championship has the hydrated strawweight division at 125 pounds. I think she could get a fresh look on the opposite side of the world and occasionally still pop in on TNT when one championship has their runs on TNT. So still be able to get in front of the eyeballs here stateside. But I think she could get a fresh start over there. I think she could stay hydrated. It's good for her body. They got a solid champion over there, Zhang Jingnan, who's got like 4 title defenses. She's got a rivalry going with Angela Lee. She goes down and fights Lee. Lee comes up and fights her. Angela Lee's a big name who has also fought at that division. So there's some names there. I don't know. I just think she could get the fresh start, and I think she could play it safe because I know that the cutting of the weight is, an important thing for her. So that's where I would send her.
I think George just coined the term scrappler, if I heard that correctly. But yes, one championship is his recommendation. Nolan, how about you? Where do you think he might go?
It's really tough. I mean, obviously, if you take everything she said at face value, she's making good money with bare knuckle fighting, and she apparently has a couple of fights left for them. So to me, I mean, if she's cool with taking some more L's on her reputation to get big paydays, then more power to her. I'm not sure what type of exclusivity her deal has in it, but if she can go back to MMA, then I think it makes sense to go to Bellator. I mean, her husband, Austin Vanderford, is there. Being on the ground at Bellator over the past year, everybody seems to get along with her. She seems to like the staff. They make things work. So to me, and I actually think Paige, in the lead up to this fight, told Pop Culture, which is not, I'm not the one sitting behind the computer scrolling through Pop Culture, but somebody did send it to me, and she did have a lot of nice things to say about Bellator and how if she were to return to MMA, that might be a good landing spot. So if she's already planting the seeds, to me, that seems to be the move that makes sense, but she's got to be okay with walking away from what seems like a big payday in bare knuckle.
Yeah, I always thought Bellator was kind of the natural fit anyway, obviously, with the connection there. I was really surprised when that wasn't the move. But like you said, paycheck's still on the line at BKFC. Mike, what do you think? I mean, is bare knuckle the right spot for her, especially if she's getting paid, or do you think MMA return would be better for her?
I think it just comes down to her passion, honestly. I mean, like Nolan kind of said there, if you believe what she's saying, she's not only saying now that her bare knuckle contract is getting her more money than she was getting in the UFC. She's saying that her personal fan website is making her more money than she was making in her bare knuckle contract, which is more than she was making in the UFC. So like right now, I think if you're Paige VanZant, it's really all about your brand and where do you think is going to help maximize your brand and bring people in. And for me, that remains bare knuckle. I mean, is she going to have any more success fighting in MMA and Bellator against the Alima McFarlanes, someone like that? Not really, in my opinion. Here in BKFC, she is the center of attention. The show revolves around her. I mean, if we could pull back the curtain a little bit, her 2 fights for them this year have been some of the biggest traffic movers we've had. And I think that's not just because of Paige. I think that's the combination of BKFC and Paige. So I think here right now, it's probably the place to be. The losses don't really mean as much, in my opinion. I think she can go in there, and even if it doesn't go her way, get a lot out of fighting for BKFC 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, right? I mean, we're only talking about 2 losses here, and they were competitive fights, so it's not like we're saying she just doesn't have it. It's just a matter of where she's going to be the most successful. But then it comes down to how are you measuring success, right? Does it really matter what the wins and losses are? I don't know what anybody's career record is in BKFC, if I'm being quite honest with you, but it's driving traffic, like you said. It's earning her money, so I guess that's what she's got to do. And hey, whatever makes you happy too. You got to have some passion for it, right? Like you said. Well, guys, in one of the biggest fights in Bellator history, Patricio Pitbull and AJ McKee headline this weekend's Bellator 263 event for both their promotion's featherweight title and the Grand Prix belt. and a lot of bragging rights on the line too, man. So there's so much going on here. What do you think? Who's facing the most pressure in this moment? And like I said, what I think is the biggest fight in Bellator history. And does either fighter have a clear edge in the matchup? A lot to unpack here. We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get us started.
First and foremost, I think you hit it on the head. I do think this is the biggest fight in Bellator history. It's certainly the most impactful. You know, you can argue some of the bigger names that Bellator brought in, probably the Kimbos of the world and the Chaels and the Fedors. They might draw more eyeballs, but for the hardcore fans, for the people that have been following along, this is a great fight. And I think that both fighters have a tremendous amount to gain. They also have, you know, a certain amount to lose. And for me, I think Patricio Pitbull has more to lose in this fight. You know, being the king of the jungle for so long, the guy that seems like whenever anybody brings up, you know, who's the best fighter in Bellator, which guy would succeed the most when they go to the UFC, it's Patricio. He's got that crown right now. You know, Michael Chandler jumping to the UFC, I think boosted his stock even more and that the public perception. So for him to go out there and lose on Saturday, I think would be a big blow to him. I think it would screw up any sort of potential plans down the line to maybe go to the UFC and try to prove that against some of the other guys that people are claiming are the best in the world. So I think he's got more to lose. I think AJ's his stock's been going up and up and up and up. So sure, if he loses, that will be a speed bump. But who's to say that his trajectory won't continue up there afterwards? People dig him, and losing to the Bellator GOAT is not the end of the world. As much as Pitbull losing to the new up-and-comer, I think would hurt his brand.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we just look at timing in terms of career. I mean, obviously Patricio right now is at the top of his game, but how long can you keep doing it at that high level? Whereas AJ is, 26 years old? I mean, he's still got plenty of future time on his side. Mike, what do you think? Anybody facing more of a pressure-packed situation? And do you like anybody in the matchup in particular?
Yeah, love Nolan, but I think he is wrong here. I think it is AJ McKee who has the more pressure. That's talking about being the Floyd Mayweather of MMA. He's going to retire undefeated. He has only 2 fights left on his Bellator contract, I believe, this being one of them. And he's already talking about, you know, pay me, maybe I'll go to the UFC. He's saying he's going to move up and take Patricio's other belts. There's a lot of dynamics here. AJ McKee has been talking a big game for a very long time, and a lot of his plans hinge on the outcome of this fight. This is a guy who said he wrote himself $1 million check when he was a little kid, and he's going to finally come in and realize all that financial success. So a lot hinges here. Patricio loses. He's still the champ at 155. We know what he's all about. He's one of the greatest fighters in Bellator history. He's already proven himself. For AJ McKee, he needs to come in and prove that everything he's been saying about how good he is actually true. And so much of that hinges on here. And I think it opens up so many big doors for him. He becomes the face of Bellator if they're able to keep him around. I just think there's a lot going for this guy coming into this fight. So all the pressure, I think, goes on McKee here to deliver. Patricio loses. He's still a champ. He's still got all the accolades, all these things. So it's a really sensational fight. I agree, the biggest in Bellator history, the most fascinating. 2 homegrown talents. They didn't crop these dudes from any other organization. It's very, very legit. And if you're put in a spot to make a pick right now, I am going to pick AJ McKee to become the new champion and do it with a finish.
Interesting points there. As you said, the big talk doesn't mean quite as much if you don't have that sparkling undefeated record. George, break the tie here. Who's facing the bigger pressure?
I'm with Mike Bond. I think McKee has the most to lose because of all the reasons he stated, perfectly worded. But I think there's a few other things too. Look, this is a chance to put his gym over, the body shop in Long Beach that him and his pops have grown for so many years. Major title for the McKee family, staying undefeated. He also told us once that after this fight, he doesn't expect to make less than $1 million. That's how much that $1 million mark means to him. It's not just the payday and what it can do for him and his family, but he feels like that's what he's going to be asking going forward. So I know a lot's riding on this. Who wants to have their first L when it's their biggest fight ever? The title's on the line. The Grand Prix title's on the line. And, you know, this is just too much. I think it's McKee that loses the most.
Interesting, man. It's going to be a big one. I cannot wait for this fight. How often does a tournament work out the way you want it to work out, right? I mean, this is the fight we wanted from the beginning. That never happens. It actually did. I am pumped up for this fight, man. Cannot wait to see it. Well, that's not the only fight this weekend, guys. Looking ahead of this weekend, Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland headline UFC on ESPN 28. Now, both fighters bring 4-fight win streaks into this matchup and are looking to prove that they belong among the division's elite and need to be talked about with the real contenders. So who's got more on the line in this contest? And while we're talking about it, are there any other fights in this card that we should be watching for this weekend at the UFC event? We'll start with you, Mike. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Get us started.
As far as who has more on the line here, I think it's got to be Uriah Hall, right? I mean, like, look at this guy. He's coming off back-to-back wins against Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman. If I told you that someone had beat those two in a row and their next fight would be Sean Strickland, I don't think many people would buy into that. And it's been a very tricky road for Uriah Hall the past couple of years. I mean, let's not forget he was supposed to headline a card against Yoel Romero at one point, and he's had a lot of big opportunities set up. And then, when he does actually get them, like against Anderson Silva, some weird stuff happens, like his retirement fight and then the Chris Weidman leg break. So there's been some luster taken off, but Uriah Hall still in the best form of his career right now, in my opinion, especially it, coincides perfectly with his move to Fortis MMA, trading under Saif Saud. So for him, I think he needs to win this one. Sean Strickland is a guy who I think is obviously the B-side here and kind of the more surprising person in this spot. He's been looking sensational at 185 too, but I think he can afford to have a setback there. Uriah Hall, I think, is 37 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. He needs to win this fight if he wants that top 5 matchup and to be included in that title conversation. He's a guy who hasn't fought Izzy yet. And he really wants that fight. He says it's his dream fight, and we need new contenders. So I think this is a big one for Uriah Hall, and going in here, he really needs to get that done. And if you're just looking for other stuff on the card, I mean, we're lying to ourselves if we say this is the UFC's best offering, especially of this month, which has had some good fights. I am interested in seeing Nico Montano back. It's just been so long. We know her championship story, and she just hasn't had the UFC momentum that many people thought she would coming off that season of Ultimate Fighter. So does she have anything left? I think this kind of hinges on this fight.
Yeah, as you mentioned, a big one for Uriah Hall and a big one for Nico as well. We'll see where each of their careers moves forward from this. George, what do you think? Anybody have more on the line here, and what else are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I agree. Strickland is 6 years younger than Uriah Hall. Uriah Hall has just kind of reached that moment. Like, this is his run, and he's got a big spotlight on him. He's got some nice wins. He can't afford the setback like Strickland can because of time in the sport, I guess, is one way of saying it. And as far as who I'm keeping an eye on this week, and selfishly, Cheyenne Bays. I used to call her fights at Tough Enough, and I saw her fight there, and I remember thinking when she won her first fight, like, okay, there could be a future here. And then she went 1-on-1 in her next, and then after that kind of lost track because she moved from the gym in Las Vegas to South Africa, then by way of Dallas. After getting married. But then when I saw her at Dana White Contender Series, I couldn't believe how great she looked. I mean, she had some power that I don't remember seeing at the amateur stage. She just had a lot of explosion, and she came, viciously, like a savage. Then she got Dana White to follow her on her Instagram. I thought she made one hell of a splash, and I want her to continue it. She seems to be happy now that she's back in Vegas, so we'll see. We'll see what she can parlay this win into if she can get the W.
Yeah, there's nothing like following somebody's career from the beginning. Same reason I'm going to be pulling for Chris Dawkins, obviously, the CFFC love. So, Nolan, talk to us about what you see in this main event. Anything else we need to be paying attention to?
No, in terms of the main event, I think everything that needed to be said has been said. Uriah Hall definitely has more on the line. Whatever the opposite of falling upward is, he's almost one downward, kind of disrespected from UFC President Dana White, but we've already gotten into that. As for the fight, as much as I appreciate George's Cheyenne Bays pick, especially for her I'll follow you home bitch line, which I thought was phenomenal. I like Trevin Jones versus Ronnie Lawrence, one of the first fights on the card. I think Ronnie Lawrence has a really high potential ceiling. Trevin Jones, despite his record, has proven that he's UFC caliber too. I think their styles match up really well. I think that'll be a very fun fight that we talk about maybe next week on Spinning Back Clique.
Yeah, that should be a fun fight, but will either one of them follow you home, bitch? We just don't know about that. Cheyenne brings it. As you said, guys, it's going to be a busy weekend. We got the UFC, Bellator, one championship all in action, not to mention we got LFA, Brave, Cage Warriors. There's so much MMA going on this weekend. There'll be lots to talk about after these fights, I'm sure. And as Nolan said, we'll do it all on Spinning Back Clique.